Longest-serving congressman in Texas history says he'll retire if the new Republican-drawn redistricting map goes into effect. That's Democrat Lloyd Doggett, who made the announcement yesterday. The 78-year-old has represented the Austin area since 1995. But this new map merges Doggett's district with another represented by Democrat Greg Casar. So instead of potentially generational primary against the 36-year-old Casar, Doggett says he's going to step aside unless the courts block the new map. Speaking of that map, it's likely to be passed today by the Texas Senate after advancing out of a special committee yesterday. As the Republican-drawn map in Texas nears final passage, California Democrats are pushing forward with a sweeping plan of their own. The state's Democratic-controlled legislature yesterday passed a series of redistricting bills aimed at flipping 5 GOP House seats there to neutralize the potential gains made by Republicans in Texas, sort of net zeros it out. The California plan, however, still requires voter approval, though, with a special election now set for November 4th. Democratic Governor Gavin Newsom of California signed the legislation shortly after it passed yesterday, giving this message to President Trump and the Texas GOP.
We got here because the President of the United States is struggling. We got here because the President of the United States is one of the most unpopular presidents in U.S. history. We got here because he recognizes that he will lose the election. Congress will go back into the hands of the Democratic Party next November. Can't win by playing by traditional sets of rules. He plays by no rules. I remind you all the time, it's not the rule of law, it's the rule of done. And we're standing up to that. We're responding what occurred in Texas. We're neutralizing what occurred, and we're giving the American people a fair chance. Because when all things are equal, we're all playing by the same set of rules, there's no question that the Republican Party will be the minority party in the House of Representatives next year.
Joining us now, politics reporter for Notice, Riley Rogerson. Riley, all these actions in Texas and California ultimately end up in our backyard of the Capitol and Congress. Things are moving quickly, though, between Texas and California. Do you think that we could see things moving along in other states just as soon? I mean, we're starting to see the impact on a member level. People saying, all right, if these maps are coming, I'm not going to run for re-election against my colleague who's also a Democrat.
Absolutely. The timeline is definitely in flux, and members who are currently in Congress are asking themselves this question: how soon am I going to be impacted by redistricting? Will it be coming to my state? Because like you said, this is going to potentially make or break the House majority next year, which is just absolutely, crucial. So members are curious. They're anxious about whether this will expand beyond California and Texas. Absolutely.
Yeah, absolutely anxious, especially because you're changing the maps midstream. I think that's what makes this process so weird. Yes, every 10 years you go through a census and then the reapportionment, you see lines redrawn then. But it's the timing of this that makes it so unorthodox and makes it so controversial. But of course, redistricting is not the only way that we see changes in Congress. People have aspirations for other office. And it's there that I want to look, because there's movement within a caucus that we talk about a lot. That's the Conservative House Freedom Caucus. And that's a group that's going to look very different by 2027. I want to put up for the screen for you what one of our friends on the Hill, Emily, posted on X, because she's talking about the changes that we're going to see. Chip Roy in Texas, often one of those people who's causing delays because he's more of a proceduralist, we'll call him, running for Texas Attorney General. You've got Ralph Norman running for South Carolina governor, a bunch of other changes here. What's the actual impact of this conservative group really changing who its faces are and what their priorities are?
Right. It's hard to overstate these members leaving the Freedom Caucus, what impact that will have on that group of people. Like you said, Chip Roy is one of the ideological leaders of the House Freedom Caucus right now in Congress. Andy Biggs is running for Arizona governor. He's the former Freedom Caucus chair. Ralph Norman has made headlines again and again and again this Congress. He voted against Speaker Mike Johnson, for example, or originally was planning to, ultimately flipped his vote, and has been a perennial thorn in leadership's side. So the fact that these are the people that are leaving the Freedom Caucus and seeking statewide office, it's really hard to imagine what the HFC will look like next term and who will kind of spring up as its next leadership.
Yeah, these are the people that you and I end up following around Congress the most, asking, what are you going to do next? What are your conversations with leadership? So I think the face of the people that we are following around and what their priorities are, the things that they typically seize on and make an issue of, is going to change. And that's going to have a really big impact with the way that Congress runs. But while we have you, you've also been following the D.C. federal takeover as Democrats continue to decry Trump's actions. Democrats have limited tools, though, to fight back on this. What kind of leverage do they actually have?
So the real fight that's coming up is the September 30th government funding deadline. Democrats are, there's a real soul searching happening within the party to decide how they want to handle that. Of course, a ton is in flux. We don't know exactly what the funding package will look like, if it will be a continuation of current levels. But Democrats do have leverage. If they don't deliver, especially in the Senate, some votes to Republicans, the government will shut down. So if Democrats want to negotiate about the D.C. takeover or any other issue, this is their moment to do so. The question now is, are they going to make the D.C. takeover one of their key issues? Some Democrats, particularly in the DMV area, told me, yes, we want to fight. We want this to be front and center of, the resistance to the Trump administration. But, other Democrats, they're more focused on issues like health care, immigration, et cetera. So we're going to see, but from local people in the D.C. area, they want to make this as big an issue as possible.
Yeah, I do think all of this ultimately drives towards the government shutdown. And I think you're right to talk about the Senate dynamics. My understanding from talking to members and sources is that as they're planning their return to Washington, strategically speaking, Democrats in the House are really leaning on Senate Republicans to say, you kind of sold us out last time. At least that's how they feel. They don't want that to happen again. And my understanding is they're really pushing for the House strategy of, if Republicans want to shut the government down, let them, to be the one that prevails here. A lot of time before that ultimately happens. End of September is that deadline, but we're going to see a lot of posturing before then. Politics reporter for Notice, Riley Rogerson, thank you for prepping us on all of it. Her latest piece is available to read online right now.